300 of London's elite froze as the heavy oak doors of the ballroom didn't just close, they were sealed from the outside. The music stopped. The champagne glasses stopped clinking. In the center of the room, Adrian Sterling stood holding the hand of his mistress, smirking at his wife, Catherine, believing he had just executed the perfect public divorce. He thought he held all the cards. He thought money was the ultimate power, but he forgot that before money, there was blood. And when the captain of the Royal Guard stepped through the service entrance, he wasn't looking for a billionaire. He was looking for Her Highness. The invite to the midnight gala at the Dorchester was the most coveted piece of cardstock in London. It was heavy, cream-coloured, and embossed with gold leaf that cost more than most people's monthly rent. For Adrian Sterling, the tech mogul behind Ether Systems, it was just another Tuesday, another venue to display his dominance. Adrian checked his reflection in the tinted window of the Rolls-Royce Phantom. He looked every inch the conqueror. 42, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and wearing a bespoke tuxedo from Huntsman & Sons that cost £15,000. He adjusted his cufflinks, platinum, encrusted with sapphires. "You look tense, darling," a voice purred from beside him. It wasn't his wife. Serena Cross sat in the leather seat, smoothing the skirt of a scandalous, blood-red dress that left very little to the imagination. Serena was 24, a former runway model turned brand ambassador for Adrian's company. She was the embodiment of new money, loud, beautiful, and hungry. "I'm not tense," Adrian said, his voice smooth. "I'm focused. Tonight changes everything. The merger with the Japanese conglomerate goes public tomorrow. My net worth will triple. I don't need the family man image anymore. The board has already signed off on the transition." "And her?" Serena nodded towards the hotel entrance, where the paparazzi were already swarming. "Catherine knows her place," Adrian scoffed. "She's been quiet for 10 years. She'll take the settlement, sign the NDA, and move to that cottage in the Cotswolds. She hates the spotlight. She's beige." That was how Adrian described his wife of 12 years. Beige, safe, boring. Catherine Sterling was the woman you married when you were building a company and needed stability. She was a nurse he'd met when he was hospitalized for exhaustion during his first startup. She made tea. She read books. She wore pearls, not diamonds. She was the perfect foundation, but Adrian felt he had built a skyscraper that now towered above her. The car pulled up. The flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. Adrian stepped out, flashing his practiced shark-like smile. He reached back in, but instead of waiting for the chauffeur, he helped Serena out himself. The crowd gasped audibly. It was a breach of protocol so sharp it felt like a slap. Everyone knew Catherine Sterling was already inside. She always arrived early to coordinate with the charity directors. Adrian walked Serena up the red carpet, his hand firmly on the small of her back. The reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Sterling! Where is Mrs. Sterling?" "Is this a statement, Adrian?" "Serena, who are you wearing?" Inside the grand ballroom, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts through the crowd of aristocrats, politicians, and hedge fund managers. At the far end of the room, near a massive ice sculpture of a swan, stood Catherine. She didn't look beige tonight. She wore a floor-length gown of midnight blue velvet. It was high-necked, long-sleeved, and backless, a conservative front with a vulnerable spine. Her hair, usually tied back in a sensible bun, was loose, cascading in dark waves over one shoulder. She held a glass of sparkling water, watching the entrance with eyes that were unreadable. Standing next to her was Lord Timothy Bramwell, an old money power player who usually refused to speak to tech billionaires. He was whispering something to Catherine, his head bowed in a posture that looked oddly like deference. "There she is," Serena whispered, tightening her grip on Adrian's arm. "She looks tired." "She's defeated," Adrian corrected. "She just doesn't know it yet." Adrian steered Serena through the crowd, cutting a path straight toward his wife. The room sensed the collision course. Conversation died down in ripples, silence spreading outward from the center of the room until the only sound was the string quartet playing a nervous rendition of Vivaldi. Adrian stopped 3 feet from Catherine. "Catherine," he said. His tone wasn't warm. It was business. Catherine looked from Adrian to Serena, then down to Serena's hand gripping Adrian's tuxedo. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She took a slow sip of her water. "Adrian," she replied. Her voice was soft, melodic, but it carried a strange resonance. "Tonight. You're late, and you've brought a guest who isn't on the list." "Serena is my future, Catherine," Adrian announced, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I think it's time we stopped pretending." Lord Bramwell stiffened, stepping forward. "Mr. Sterling, perhaps this is a conversation for—" "Quiet, Bramwell," Adrian snapped, not even looking at the Lord. "This is between me and my soon-to-be ex-wife." Adrian reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He slapped it onto the table next to the ice sculpture. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding against the base of a crystal vase. "The lawyers sent these this morning, but you didn't answer the door," Adrian said, his voice projecting to the silent room. "Divorce papers, irreconcilable differences. I'm being generous, Catherine. The townhouse, the cottage, and £5 million. But I want you out of the Kensington estate by morning. Serena wants to redecorate." The gasp from the crowd was audible. This wasn't just a breakup, it was an execution. Serena smirked, a cruel, victorious curl of red lips. "I'm thinking marble for the foyer, Catherine. That wood is so dated." Catherine looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Adrian. For the first time in 12 years, Adrian saw something in her eyes he didn't recognize. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was pity. "You really should have read the pre-nuptial agreement closer, Adrian," Catherine said softly. "I wrote the prenup." Adrian laughed, playing to the crowd. "I wrote it to protect my assets from you." "No," Catherine said. She set her glass down. "You wrote it to protect your assets. You didn't read the addendum my father's lawyers added, the one about moral turpitude and public disgrace." "Your father?" Adrian sneered. "The retired history teacher from Geneva?" "I'm trembling." Catherine sighed. It was the sigh of a parent watching a child touch a hot stove after being told no. "He taught history, Adrian. He didn't say he wasn't part of it." Catherine turned to Lord Bramwell. "Timothy, what is the time?" Bramwell checked a pocket watch. Gold, bearing a crest Adrian didn't recognize. "It is 21 o'clock hours, ma'am." "Ma'am?" Adrian mocked. "Since when does a lord call a nurse ma'am?" "Since 21 o'clock hours," Catherine said, "because as of this minute, the grace period I negotiated for you is over." Adrian frowned. He didn't like losing control of the narrative. He was the disruptor, the genius. Catherine was the background noise. She was supposed to run away crying, leaving him the sympathetic victor stuck in a loveless marriage. "You're talking nonsense," Adrian said, grabbing Serena's hand again to reassure himself. "Come on, Serena, let's get a drink. I'm done here." He turned his back on his wife. Clang. The sound was massive, mechanical, and final. Every head in the room turned toward the main double doors. The brass handles were turning, but the doors weren't opening. Then came the sound of heavy bolts sliding into place from the outside. Thud-click, thud-click. "What is this?" Serena asked, her voice shrill. Guests began to murmur. A few security guards hired by the hotel moved towards the doors, speaking into their earpieces. "Fire drill," someone suggested. "Terrorist threat," whispered another. Adrian marched towards the doors, his anger flaring. "Open this up! I am Adrian Sterling. I have the mayor on speed dial." He reached for the handle and rattled it, locked tight. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police commissioner." "There is no signal, Adrian." Catherine's voice cut through the panic. She hadn't moved from her spot by the ice sculpture. Adrian looked at his screen. No service. He looked around. Dozens of the wealthiest people in London were checking their phones. Nothing. A localized jammer. "What did you do?" Adrian stormed back to her, his face turning red. "Is this some desperate stunt? You paid off the hotel security to embarrass me?" "I didn't pay anyone," Catherine said calmly, "and this isn't hotel security." Suddenly, the side doors, the service entrances usually reserved for waiters, burst open simultaneously. But it wasn't catering staff that marched in. 12 men entered. They moved with a synchronization that was terrifying. They wore black tactical gear, but on their shoulders were patches that didn't belong to the London Metropolitan Police nor the SAS. The patches were crimson, embroidered with a golden double-headed hawk holding a sword. They carried assault rifles, held at the low ready. They wore balaclavas, but their eyes were steely and focused. The crowd screamed. People dove under tables. Serena shrieked and clutched Adrian, using him as a human shield. "Everyone remain calm," Adrian shouted, though his voice cracked. "I will negotiate. I am the CEO of—" "Silence!" The command came from the leader of the tactical team. He was a giant of a man, stepping into the light. He didn't wear a mask. He had a scar running down his left cheek and silver hair cut in a military fade. Lord Bramwell gasped. "Colonel Hansel!" "Good God!" The colonel ignored the room. He ignored the terrified billionaires. His eyes scanned the crowd with predator precision until they locked onto one target. He walked past Adrian as if he were a piece of furniture. He walked past the trembling Serena. He stopped in front of Catherine. The room held its breath. Was she a hostage? Was she the target? The colonel slammed his heels together. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He holstered his weapon in one fluid motion, then dropped to one knee, bowing his head so low his forehead almost touched the floor. "Forgive the intrusion, Excellency," the colonel boomed, his voice thick with a Germanic accent. "Code Black was initiated at 2055. The king is dead." Adrian stared. His brain couldn't process the data. King? Excellency? Catherine looked down at the kneeling soldier. Her face was sorrowful, but resigned. She reached out and touched the soldier's shoulder. "Rise, Hansel," she said softly. "I told my uncle I didn't want the throne. I told him to give it to Stefan." "Prince Stefan has been arrested for treason, ma'am," Colonel Hansel said, standing up and towering over everyone. "He attempted to sell the cobalt rights to a foreign power. The council has invoked the Bloodline Act of 1704. You are the only remaining heir to the Duchy of Valoria." Valoria. Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. Valoria wasn't just a country. It was a sovereign city-state in the Alps, smaller than Monaco, but infinitely richer. It was the banking vault of the old world. It controlled rare earth mineral rights that Ether Systems, Adrian's company, desperately needed for their microchips. He had spent 5 years trying to get a meeting with the Minister of Trade of Valoria. He had been rejected 10 times, and his wife, his nurse wife, was the heir? "No," Adrian whispered. "This is a joke. Cat, tell them to stop." Colonel Hansel turned his head slowly. He looked at Adrian like one looks at a cockroach on a wedding cake. "Who is this civilian addressing the Grand Duchess?" Hansel asked, his hand resting on the hilt of a combat knife. "He is my husband," Catherine said. "Ex-husband," Serena yelled, trying to reclaim some ground, though she was shaking. "He served her papers. We're together." Hansel looked at the divorce papers still sitting on the table. He looked at the envelope. He looked at Serena. "He served papers to the crown?" Hansel asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "In Valoria, to serve legal writ to the sovereign without council approval is an act of aggression." "We are in London," Adrian shouted, trying to regain his authority. "British law applies here. You can't just storm the Dorchester with guns." "Mr. Sterling," Lord Bramwell spoke up, stepping to Catherine's side. "You really should have learned more about your wife's family. The Dorchester is owned by the Valorian Sovereign Wealth Fund. Technically, we are on Valorian soil." Adrian looked at the floor. He looked at the walls. He realized with a sick, sinking feeling that he wasn't in a hotel ballroom anymore. He was in a foreign embassy, and he had just tried to publicly humiliate the Queen. Catherine finally turned her eyes to Adrian. The softness was gone. The beige was gone. In its place was the steel of a woman who had been raised to rule nations, but had chosen love, only to have that love thrown in her face for a younger model. "You wanted a divorce, Adrian," Catherine said. "You wanted to split the assets." She gestured to the colonel. "Secure the exits," she commanded. "No one leaves until I have audited every single person in this room, especially him." The panic in the room shifted from physical fear to financial terror. These were people with offshore accounts, secret mistresses, and tax evasions. The idea of a royal audit by a sovereign state's military intelligence was worse than death. "Catherine, please," Adrian stammered, his confident facade cracking like cheap plaster. "Let's be reasonable. We can talk about this in private. Send these actors away." "Actors?" Colonel Hansel signaled to his men. 2 guards stepped forward, grabbing Adrian by the arms. "Get your hands off me! Do you know how much this suit costs?" Adrian yelled. "It costs 3,000 euros less than the tactical vest I am wearing," the guard muttered, dragging Adrian toward a chair in the center of the room. Serena tried to back away, blending into the crowd. "Grab her too," Catherine said. She didn't shout. She didn't point. She just spoke, and it happened. 2 guards intercepted Serena, who began to scream about her rights and her Instagram followers. Catherine walked to the center of the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. She stood before Adrian, who was now forced into a chair, looking up at her. "You mentioned the merger with the Japanese conglomerate," Catherine said, looking down at him. "Yamamoto Industries, correct?" "Yes," Adrian breathed. "The deal closes tomorrow at 9 a.m. If I'm not there, the stock tanks. You'll lose money too, Cat. Half of it is yours." "Actually," Catherine said, pacing slowly around him, "I made a phone call while you were shouting at the door. I called CEO Yamamoto." You don't know him," Adrian scoffed. "I don't. But my godfather does." "Who is your godfather?" "The Emperor of Japan," Catherine said casually. "We spent summers in Kyoto. I remember Koji Yamamoto. He was the gardener's son. He has a very high respect for tradition." Adrian felt like he was suffocating. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that Ether Systems is run by a man who lacks honor, a man who betrays his vows for," she glanced at Serena, "temporary distractions. In Japan, business is about trust. If you cannot be trusted with a wife who supported you when you had nothing, you cannot be trusted with a billion-dollar merger." "You killed the deal?" Adrian's voice was a squeak. "You destroyed the company? That's my life's work." "No, Adrian." Catherine leaned in close. "It was our life's work. Who stayed up editing your pitch decks? Who charmed the investors when you were too arrogant to speak to them? Who nursed you back to health when the stress gave you an ulcer?" "Me." She stood up straight. "And you threw me away because I didn't match your new upholstery." Colonel Hansel stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Your Highness, we have accessed Mr. Sterling's phone. It seems he has been transferring funds to an account in the Cayman Islands under the name Serena Ventures for the past 6 months." The crowd gasped again. "This was embezzlement of marital assets." That's consulting fees," Adrian lied. "It is theft," Catherine said. "And since the funds were transferred from a joint account held in a bank that is a subsidiary of the Valorian Central Bank, it is embezzlement of crown funds." Serena stopped struggling. "I didn't know. He told me it was his money. I'm just a brand ambassador." "You're an accessory," Hansel stated flatly. "Adrian?" Serena screamed, turning on him instantly. "You told me she was a nobody. You told me she was stupid. You said you had the lawyers in your pocket." "She is a nobody," Adrian shouted, desperate. "This is all a trick. Valoria is a tiny place. It's meaningless." Catherine smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. Valoria is small, yes, but we hold the debt for half of the European Union, and we have very strict laws about adultery when it involves the royal family. Catherine turned to Hansel. Colonel, initiate the asset freeze. Global. Yes, Your Highness. Hansel tapped his earpiece. Execute Order 66. Sorry, wrong channel. Execute Order 01. A moment later, Adrian's watch, a smart watch hidden under his cuff, buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again. Your account ending in 4402 has been frozen. Your credit line at Barclays has been suspended. Your mortgage payments have been declined. What are you doing? Adrian cried. I'm taking back what's mine, Catherine said. You wanted a divorce? You can have it. But per the laws of Valoria, which you are currently standing on, a traitor to the spouse forfeits all assets acquired during the union. She looked at his tuxedo, including the suit. What? Strip him, Hansel ordered. No, you can't be serious, Adrian yelled as the guards moved in. I am deadly serious, Catherine said, turning her back on him. I entered this marriage with nothing but my heart. I will leave with everything else. As the guards reached for Adrian's lapels, a loud banging came from the main doors. Not a polite knock, a battering ram. Police! A voice amplified by a megaphone boomed from the other side. Open the doors! Adrian laughed hysterically. The Met, thank God. You're done, Catherine. You've kidnapped people. You're going to jail. Catherine didn't look worried. She looked at her watch. Right on time. Who? Adrian asked. The police? No, Catherine said. The diplomatic corps. The main doors burst open. But it wasn't the police who rushed in. It was a team of men in grey suits, led by a man Adrian recognized from the news. It was the British Foreign Secretary. He looked sweaty and out of breath. He ran past the stunned hotel staff, past the armed Valorian guards, and skidded to a halt in front of Catherine. Your Highness, the Foreign Secretary gasped, bowing awkwardly. We just received the communique from the Prime Minister. We had no idea you were in the country. We apologize for the lack of protocol. Adrian's jaw hit the floor. Secretary, she held us hostage. She has armed men. The Foreign Secretary looked at Adrian with disdain. Mr. Sterling, be quiet. You're currently creating a diplomatic incident with our oldest banking ally. He turned back to Catherine. Ma'am, the Prime Minister has a car waiting. Your brother. The situation in Valoria is unstable. We need to get you to the embassy immediately for your safety. And my husband? Catherine asked. Your ex-husband, the secretary corrected, looking at the divorce papers, is a private citizen. However, if he has violated Valorian financial laws, we have an extradition treaty. Adrian slumped in his chair. Extradition. To a country where his wife was the queen. I will go with you, Catherine said to the secretary. But first, there is one last thing. She walked back to Adrian. He was shivering, not from cold, but from shock. You said I was beige, she whispered. You said I was safe. She leaned down and kissed him on the cheek. It was the kiss of death. I was never safe, Adrian. I was dormant. Catherine straightened up, her velvet dress catching the light. She looked every inch the monarch. Colonel Hansel, release the guests. But keep Mr. Sterling and Miss Cross in custody until the extradition paperwork is signed. Yes, Your Majesty. Majesty, Adrian whispered. Oh. Catherine paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder. Didn't I mention? My father wasn't just a history teacher. He was the Grand Duke. But since my brother's arrest, the council decided a duchess wasn't enough. She smiled, and for the first time, Adrian saw the diamonds glittering in her hair, not jewelry, but a small, discreet tiara she had pulled from her clutch. Long live the Queen! Lord Bramwell shouted from the crowd. Long live the Queen! The room roared back. Adrian watched as his wife walked out of the ballroom, flanked by the Royal Guard and the British government, leaving him sitting in a chair, about to lose his fortune, his freedom, and his clothes. Serena was sobbing on the floor. I'll testify against him. I have emails. I have texts." Adrian looked at her. Then he looked at the closed doors. He had chosen a mistress over a wife. He had chosen a model over a monarch. He had chosen the exit, but the exit was blocked. And now the real drama was just beginning. The flight to Valoria was not the luxury experience Adrian Sterling was accustomed to. He was used to sipping scotch in a Gulfstream G650, discussing quarterly earnings. Now, he was shackled to the floor of a C-130 Hercules transport plane, the deafening roar of the engines vibrating through his bones. He wasn't wearing his £15,000 tuxedo anymore. He had been stripped and placed in an orange jumpsuit, a colour he had once mocked as pedestrian. Across the aisle, Serena Cross sat shivering. She hadn't been shackled, but she was weeping silently into a blanket a guard had thrown at her. She wouldn't look at Adrian. "Serena!" Adrian hissed over the engine noise. "Stop crying. I have a plan. As soon as we land, I demand to see the British consul. They can't hold us. It's kidnapping." Serena looked up, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. "You don't get it, do you? You still think you're the most powerful person in the room. Look at them." She nodded toward the guards. They weren't looking at their phones or chatting. They were statues, watching Adrian with a mixture of discipline and utter contempt. "They aren't police, Adrian," Serena whispered. "They're the royal guard. You insulted their queen. In the old days, they would have beheaded you by now." "This is the 21st century," Adrian snapped. "Monarchies are tourist attractions. They sell keychains and wave from balconies. Not this one," Colonel Hansel's voice boomed. He stepped out from the cockpit area, holding a thermos of coffee. He looked fresh, alert, and dangerous. "Valoria is not a tourist attraction, Mr. Sterling," Hansel said, sitting on a crate opposite Adrian. "We are the Switzerland that Switzerland is afraid of. We are the vault where the world hides its secrets. And you—" He took a slow sip of coffee. "You are just a loose end." The plane banked sharply. Through the small porthole, Adrian saw jagged, snow-capped peaks rushing up to meet them. Nestled between two massive mountains was a city that defied logic. It was a fortress of stone and glass, built into the sheer rock face. It looked medieval, but it glowed with the blue hum of advanced LED grids. Valoria, the eagle's nest of Europe. The landing was rough. As soon as the ramp dropped, cold mountain air bit into Adrian's skin. He was hauled out onto a tarmac that was teeming with military personnel. But there were no press cameras here, no paparazzi. This was a black site. They were separated immediately. "Serena!" Adrian shouted as they dragged her toward a waiting black SUV. "Don't sign anything. Demand a lawyer." "I'm not demanding anything," Serena screamed back, desperate to distance herself. "I'm cooperating. I'll tell them everything about the Cayman accounts." Adrian watched her go, a knot of dread forming in his stomach. He was alone. He was marched not to a dungeon, but to an elevator cut into the living rock. It descended rapidly, the numbers on the display counting down. -1, -5, -10. When the doors opened, Adrian gasped. He was in a circular room with walls made of reinforced glass, but the terrifying part was what lay beyond the glass. Nothing. The cell was suspended inside a massive natural cavern, hanging over a subterranean abyss that dropped into darkness. The only way in or out was a retractable bridge. "Welcome to the sky cells," Hansel said, pushing Adrian inside. "Usually reserved for terrorists and war criminals, but Her Majesty thought you would appreciate the view." "This is inhumane," Adrian shouted, pressing his hands against the glass. "I want my phone call." "You have no rights here," Hansel said, stepping back as the bridge began to retract. "You are not a citizen of Valoria. You are an enemy combatant who attempted to defraud the sovereign. The trial begins tomorrow at dawn. I suggest you sleep. It's cold at night." The bridge locked into the wall, leaving Adrian stranded on an island of glass in the dark. For hours he paced, his mind raced. He thought about the merger, the money, the reputation he had built. It was all turning to ash. But Adrian Sterling hadn't become a billionaire by giving up. He was a shark, and sharks didn't die. They kept moving. He sat on the cot and closed his eyes, accessing the one asset Catherine hadn't frozen, his memory. He remembered the early days of ether systems. He remembered the proprietary code he had written for the core servers. He remembered how proud Catherine had been when they landed their first government contract, a contract to supply secure server chips to... Adrian's eyes snapped open. A smile, slow and predatory, spread across his face. "Valoria," he whispered. He stood up and walked to the glass. "Hey!" he shouted at the camera mounted in the corner. "Hey, tell the Queen I want to talk. Tell her I know about the Chimera Protocol." The High Court of Valoria was not a courtroom. It was a theatre of intimidation. The ceiling was 50 feet high, draped in banners of crimson and gold. The gallery was packed with the Council of 12, the oligarchs and nobles who really ran the country. They wore formal robes, their faces stern. At the head of the room, on a throne carved from a single block of black marble, sat Catherine. She wore the full regalia of the Grand Duchess turned Queen, a heavy velvet robe, the sash of the Order of the Hawk, and the Iron Crown of Valoria. She looked nothing like the nurse who used to make him chamomile tea. She looked ancient and terrifying. Adrian stood in the center of the room, shackled at the wrists and ankles. He had refused the court-appointed advocate. "Adrian Sterling," the High Justicar announced, reading from a scroll. "You are charged with high treason, grand larceny, and conspiracy to defraud the Crown. The evidence provided by your associate, Miss Cross, is damning. She has confirmed that you knowingly siphoned funds from the joint accounts to finance a competitor to Valorian interests." Catherine looked down at him. Her face was a mask of stone. "Do you have a defense, prisoner?" she asked. Her voice echoed in the vast hall. Adrian straightened his back. He looked at the council, then at Catherine. "I do," Adrian said, "but it's not a legal defense. It's a technical one." He took a step forward, the chains rattling. "Your Majesty," he said, emphasizing the title with mock reverence. "You froze my assets. You seized my properties. You have my mistress testifying against me. You think you have won." "I have won," Catherine stated. "The evidence is irrefutable." "True," Adrian nodded. "But you forgot one thing, Cat. You forgot who built your banking infrastructure." A murmur went through the council. "Ether systems," Adrian continued, his voice gaining strength. "We supply the microchips for 80% of the world's high-frequency trading servers, including the Central Bank of Valoria." "We will replace your systems," the Minister of Finance stood up, looking angry. "We are already removing ether hardware." "Too late," Adrian laughed. 3 years ago, when we updated your servers, I installed a little something called the Chimera Protocol. It's a dead man's switch. It requires a biometric check-in from me every 48 hours. If I don't check in, the system assumes I'm dead or compromised." "And what happens then?" Catherine asked. She didn't look scared, which annoyed Adrian. "It deletes the encryption keys," Adrian smirked. "All of them. Every bank account in Valoria. Every record of debt held by the European Union. Every hidden asset of the people in this room. Poof. Gone. Valoria goes from being the world's bank to being a dark hole of unrecoverable data. The global economy crashes, and Valoria is blamed. You'll be invaded by NATO before lunch." Silence descended on the court. Absolute, terrified silence. The council members looked at each other in panic. "He's bluffing!" Colonel Hansel shouted, stepping forward. "Let me interrogate him. I'll get the code." "It's not a code you can beat out of me," Adrian said coolly. "It's a heartbeat sensor connected to my cloud profile. If my heart stops, the data burns. If I don't verify my identity on a secure line, the data burns. You have..." He checked the wall clock. 6 hours until the next check-in. Adrian looked at Catherine. "So here is the deal. You drop the charges. You unfreeze my assets. All of them. You transfer the £50 million owed to me, and you let me fly out of here on my jet. Once I'm in airspace, I'll deactivate Chimera." The council erupted. "We cannot let him destroy the economy. Pay him! Kill him!" Catherine raised her hand. The room fell silent instantly. She stood up and walked slowly down the steps of the dais, stopping just inches from Adrian. She smelled of myrrh and cold air. "You really are a sociopath, aren't you?" she whispered. "You would burn down the world just to save your own skin." "I learned from the best," Adrian countered. "You ambushed me at a party. I'm just returning the favor." Catherine studied him. "The Chimera protocol. I remember you working on that. Late nights. You told me it was a security patch to protect hospitals from ransomware. I lied, clearly." Catherine turned to the council. "My lords, if we give in to blackmail, we are no longer a sovereign nation. We are a subsidiary of ether systems. If we don't," the finance minister trembled, "we are bankrupt." Catherine looked back at Adrian. Her eyes were sad. "You think money is the only power, Adrian. That is your fatal flaw." She turned to Hansel. "Take him back to the Sky Cell. Isolate him from any network." "But the deadline," Adrian shouted, his confidence wavering slightly. 6 hours, Catherine. You can't gamble with this." "I'm not gambling," Catherine said, turning her back. "I'm stalling." Back in the glass cell, Adrian checked his watch every 10 minutes. 4 hours left. 3 hours. He was sweating now. He had expected them to fold immediately. The threat of financial annihilation usually worked. Why wasn't she negotiating? Did she think he wouldn't do it? He would do it. He had to. It was his only card. Suddenly the lights in the cavern flickered. The hum of the ventilation system died. The blue LED grids on the walls winked out, plunging the cavern into near total darkness, save for the emergency red strip lights. A mechanical grinding noise echoed through the dark. The retractable bridge was moving. Adrian stood up, pressing himself against the back wall. "Hello? Hansel?" The bridge locked into place. The glass door hissed open. Standing there wasn't a guard. It was a man in a hooded, grey cloak, holding a flashlight. He lowered the hood. He was younger than Catherine, with the same dark eyes but a weaker chin and a nervous twitch in his cheek. "Prince Stefan," Adrian breathed. The traitor brother, the man who had tried to sell the Cobalt rights and lost the throne to Catherine. "Mr. Sterling," Stefan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We don't have much time. The power cut will only fool the sensors for 5 minutes." "You're under arrest," Adrian said, confused. "Hansel said you were in the dungeon." "I have friends," Stefan said, stepping into the cell. "There are many in Valoria who do not think a woman should sit on the Iron Throne, especially a woman who spent the last decade playing nursemaid in London." Stefan handed Adrian a tablet. It was an encrypted satellite phone. "I heard your little speech in the courtroom," Stefan said. "Impressive. The Chimera protocol. It's real?" "Of course it's real," Adrian said, snatching the tablet. "Good, because I need it." Stefan pulled a pistol from his cloak. He didn't point it at Adrian. He pointed it at the door. "My sister thinks she can solve this with diplomacy. She has called in cyber warfare experts from GCHQ. They are trying to hack your servers right now to bypass the dead man's switch." Adrian laughed nervously. "They won't get in. It's quantum encrypted." "Perhaps," Stefan said. "But I have a better proposal. You want your freedom? I want my throne." "I'm listening," Adrian said. "Trigger the protocol," Stefan commanded. Adrian froze. "What? No. If I trigger it, I lose my leverage. The economy crashes." "Exactly." Stefan's eyes gleamed with madness. "The economy crashes. The council panics. The people riot. In the chaos, I will mobilize the loyalist regiments I have stationed in the lower valley. We will storm the palace, arrest Catherine for incompetence and failure to protect the state. And I will take the crown. And me? Once I am king, I will restore your servers from the physical backups in the vault, which only the monarch can access. We save the data. I look like the hero who fixed Catherine's mess. And you? I will give you the cobalt rights. Exclusive access to the rarest minerals on Earth. You'll be the richest man in history. Adrian's mind raced. It was insane. It was treason. It was a coup. But the alternative was life in a glass box or extradition to a British prison. How do I know you won't kill me once you have the crown? Adrian asked. Because you know the system, Stefan said. I need you to run the tech. Valoria is becoming a digital state. I need a technocrat by my side. Catherine is stuck in the past. We are the future. The red lights blinked faster. The power was coming back on. Decide, Sterling, Stefan hissed. The guards will be here in 60 seconds. Adrian looked at the tablet. He looked at the bridge. He thought of Catherine's face in the courtroom, the pity she had shown him. She looked at him like he was a broken toy. He hated pity. Do it, Adrian said. Stefan handed him the device. Input the kill code. Burn it all down. Adrian typed in the sequence. His fingers flew across the screen. Alpha, Omega, Sterling. 007. Confirm deletion of encryption keys. Adrian hesitated for a fraction of a second. This was nuclear. This would ruin millions of lives. She chose the exit, Adrian muttered to himself, echoing the night of the gala. Now I'm blocking it. He pressed enter. The screen flashed red. Protocol executed. Somewhere deep in the mountain, server fans spun down. Hard drives began to wipe. It's done, Adrian said, looking up. Stefan smiled. Excellent. Then Stefan raised the pistol and pointed it directly at Adrian's chest. Thank you for your service, Mr. Sterling. But a king cannot have loose ends. Bang! The gunshot was deafening in the small glass cell. Adrian felt a hammer blow to his chest. He stumbled back, hitting the glass wall, sliding down. He looked at his chest. Blood was blooming on the orange jumpsuit. You? Adrian gasped. You were right, Stefan sneered, looking down at him. Shark eat shark, and you are just a minnow in my ocean. Stefan turned to leave, tossing the tablet into the abyss. But as he stepped onto the bridge, the lights in the cavern didn't just come back on. They blazed blinding white. Floodlights from every angle hit the glass cell. Cease fire! Colonel Hansel's voice, amplified through speakers, shook the walls. Stefan froze. He looked up. Standing on a viewing platform above the cell, behind a wall of bulletproof glass, was Catherine. She wasn't looking at Adrian. She was looking at Stefan. And she wasn't alone. The entire Council of 12 was standing behind her. What is this? Stefan shouted, spinning around with his gun raised. It's a trap, brother. Catherine's voice came over the intercom. We knew you were communicating with the prison guards. We let you in. I executed the protocol, Stefan screamed, waving his gun. The banks are gone. I have won. Actually, Adrian's voice groaned from the floor. Stefan spun around. Adrian was holding his chest, grimacing in pain, but he was alive. He pulled his hand away. There was blood, but not a fatal amount. He reached into his jumpsuit and pulled out a thick, leather-bound notebook he had stuffed under the fabric. The prison rule book Hansel had given him. The bullet was lodged in the spine. You missed, Adrian wheezed, coughing. And regarding the protocol, Adrian held up the tablet Stefan had discarded. It hadn't fallen into the abyss. It had landed on the edge of the cot. I didn't execute the Chimera protocol. Adrian smiled, his teeth stained with blood. I executed the sandbox protocol. Stefan looked confused. Sandbox? It's a simulation, Adrian rasped. I ran a dummy program. It looked like it was deleting the keys, but it just moved them to a secure partition. I didn't destroy the economy, Stefan. I just made you think I did, so you would confess to treason in front of... He pointed up at the window. The entire government. Catherine watched from above, her expression unreadable. Why? Stefan whispered, the gun shaking in his hand. Why save her? You hate her. Adrian looked up at his wife. I don't hate her, Adrian said softly, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion. I just didn't deserve her. and I'd rather be in a cell run by a woman of honor than free in a kingdom run by a snake like you. Take him! Hansel roared. Guards rappelled down from the ceiling. Stefan was tackled before he could fire another shot. Adrian sat slumped against the glass wall, bleeding, tired, and for the first time in his life, completely empty of ambition. He watched as his wife turned and walked away from the viewing window. She didn't look back. Adrian woke up to the smell of antiseptic and mountain pine. He wasn't in the glass cell anymore, nor was he in the afterlife. He was lying in a bed with crisp white linens, surrounded by beeping monitors, in a room that looked more like a 5-star hotel suite than a hospital. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his chest slammed him back down. He groaned, his hand instinctively going to his ribs. 3 broken ribs and a severe hematoma, a voice said from the window. But the book took the brunt of the impact. The Royal Prison Handbook is quite thick. Mandatory reading has finally saved a life. Adrian turned his head. Catherine stood by the window, looking out at the snow-covered peaks of Valoria. She wasn't wearing the crown or the velvet robes. She was wearing a simple cream-coloured blouse and dark trousers. She looked like Catherine again, the woman he had married. "You're alive," Adrian rasped, his throat dry. "I am," she said, turning to face him. "And so are you, though my counsel argued strictly against it." She walked over to the bedside table and poured a glass of water. She held the straw to his lips. For a moment, it was just like the old days. Catherine the nurse, taking care of Adrian the workaholic. The intimacy of the gesture made Adrian's chest ache more than the bullet wound. "Stefan?" Adrian asked after drinking. "In the Iron Keep," Catherine said, her voice hardening. "There will be no public trial for him. He will simply cease to exist in the public eye. Treason by a blood relative is complicated. But he will never threaten the throne again." "And Serena?" Catherine set the glass down. "Miss Cross was escorted to the border this morning. She has been permanently banned from Valoria and the European Schengen zone due to her involvement in financial fraud. She returned to London. I imagine the paparazzi are waiting for her. Without your protection, the tabloids will eat her alive." Adrian closed his eyes. He felt a strange pang of guilt, but it was fleeting. Serena had been ready to sell him out for a plea deal. "So," Adrian sighed, "what happens to me? I saved your kingdom. I saved your data. I assume that buys me a pardon?" Catherine pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. She looked at him with an intensity that made him want to squirm. "You ran the sandbox protocol," she said. "You tricked Stefan. You proved your loyalty in the 11th hour." "Exactly," Adrian said, a glimmer of his old arrogance returning. "So unfreeze the accounts. Let me go back to London. We can call the divorce a misunderstanding. Or if you want, we can finalize it, and I'll take half." Catherine stared at him for a long silence. Then she reached into a folder on her lap and pulled out a single piece of paper. "Do you know why I loved you, Adrian?" The question caught him off guard. "Because I was brilliant? Because I was going places?" "No," she said softly, "because you were broken. When I met you, you were exhausted, scared, and full of dreams. You wanted to build ether systems, not to get rich, but to connect people. You had a purpose. I loved the builder. I hated the billionaire." She slid the paper onto his chest. "I cannot let you go with half, Adrian. You embezzled from the crown. You conspired initially to destroy us. The penalty for that is life imprisonment." Adrian's heart hammered. "But I fixed it." "You put out a fire you helped start," Catherine corrected. "However, because you took a bullet for the crown, and because you spared us a civil war, I am granting you an act of grace." Adrian looked at the paper. It was a deed of release. "You are free to leave Valoria," Catherine explained. "You will not go to prison. You will not be extradited to the UK. "And the money?" Adrian asked, his eyes scanning the document. "The money is gone," Catherine said simply. "What?" "The assets you embezzled have been seized as reparations. Ether Systems has been nationalized by the Valorian government. It is now a state-run entity. The merger with Yamamoto Industries has been cancelled. "You can't do that," Adrian shouted, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "That company is my baby. I built it from a garage." "And you used it to cheat your wife and threaten a nation." Catherine stood up. "You leave here with exactly what you brought into this marriage, Adrian." She reached into her pocket and pulled out an object. She placed it on the table. It was his old, battered wristwatch, a cheap Timex he had worn 10 years ago, before the Rolexes and Patek Philippe's. "You leave with your life," Catherine said, "and a clean slate, no debt, no criminal record, but no billions." Adrian stared at the cheap watch. It ticked loudly in the quiet room. "You're ruining me," he whispered. "I'm saving you," Catherine said. She walked to the door. "You've spent the last decade climbing a mountain, Adrian, only to realize you were climbing the wrong one. Now you're at the bottom again. You can build something new, something real, or you can stay bitter and drown. The choice is yours." She opened the door. Colonel Hansel was waiting outside. "Catherine," Adrian called out. She paused, her hand on the handle. She didn't turn around. "Did you ever really love me?" he asked. "Or was I just a project?" Catherine looked at the gold ring on her finger, the wedding band she hadn't taken off yet. She slowly slid it off, placing it in her pocket. "I loved you enough to let you go," she said. "Goodbye, Adrian." The door clicked shut. 2 weeks later, a man in a grey coat walked through the arrivals terminal at Heathrow Airport. He didn't have a security detail. He didn't have a limousine waiting. He carried a single duffel bag. Adrian Sterling walked out into the London rain. He checked his wrist. The old Timex read 2 p.m. He walked past a newsstand. The headline on the Financial Times screamed, "Valoria nationalizes tech giant. Queen Catherine secures Europe's digital future." Next to it, a trashy tabloid cover showed a picture of Serena Cross, looking disheveled, with the headline, "Mistress in meltdown. Model sued by sponsors." Adrian stopped. He looked at the faces of the people rushing by. Commuters, tourists, families. Nobody recognized him. He was just another face in the crowd. The titan of tech was dead. He reached into his pocket and felt the few £100 Catherine had given him. Gate money, she had called it. He walked to the curb to hail a black cab. "Where to, mate?" the driver asked. Adrian hesitated. He couldn't go to the Kensington estate. It was seized. He couldn't go to the club. His membership was revoked. He thought about Catherine's final words. "You're at the bottom again. Build something real." For the first time in years, the crushing weight of maintaining his image was gone. He didn't have to pretend to be a god anymore. He was just a man. And strangely, despite the rain, despite the poverty, despite the loss, he felt free. "Take me to Shoreditch," Adrian said. "I know a little garage space for rent. I have an idea for a startup." The cab pulled away, merging into the traffic, disappearing into the grey city. The billionaire was gone, but the builder was back. What a ride. Adrian Sterling thought he held all the cards: money, power, and a younger mistress. But he forgot the most important rule of the game: never underestimate the person who knows you best. Catherine wasn't just a beige wife. She was a dormant queen waiting for her moment. In the end, Adrian lost his fortune, but he regained his humanity. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes rock bottom is the solid foundation we need to rebuild our lives properly. He chose the Mistress, but the Royal Guard didn't just block the exit. They forced him to look in the mirror. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think Catherine's punishment was fair? Should she have given him half the money since he saved the kingdom, or did he deserve to lose it all for his betrayal? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, redemption, and royal justice, please smash that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and subscribe to the channel for more stories where the underdog takes the crown. Thanks for listening.